the fig tree down. It's not bearing any fruit.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Russello, as always, joined by Joe Russello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Disgrazia.
They will not allow Donald Trump to be president.
Joe Russello, let me ask you a question.
I have a better chance of becoming president than Donald Trump.
I'd vote for you.
It's thrown around too liberally, hate speech. Just because your feelings are hurt doesn't mean it's hate speech. So there are issues here that cross political lines.
It means that your libtard friends are not going to invite you over for Grey Goose and Bob Wild.
If you think that America is about you, you're just fool.
I got to show you something that has me aggravated. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Russello and Joe Russello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. We're going to jump right in. This is going to be a powerful conversation. We have two guests on tonight. We're starting the first segment with Pastor Artur Pawlowski. We're going to be discussing the essence of the conversation is really we thought we had certain freedoms. We thought we had certain guaranteed freedoms. Now, Pastor Art, he's up in Canada. Obviously, we're here in the United States. Okay, we can't take our freedoms for granted. You would think freedom of speech, okay, freedom of religion. Well, now it's all hate speech, right? But I'm not going to be too long-winded because we want to jump right in. Just a quick introduction. Most of you out there know Pastor Art because he stood up. He went into the breach. He stood up to defend his flock, to defend his church. Okay, he said no to the Canadian government, right? And he's paying a price for it. And the fact is, quick bio: he is a well-known advocate for the poor and the homeless. He is a Canadian clergyman and civil and human rights activist. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe, our friend.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Excellent. I'm going to hand it over to Joe Russello.
Pastor Art, you grew up under a communist regime. I mean, you saw soldiers with machine guns, tanks on the streets, and the people rose up in Poland in 1981. I go to a Polish American church in my hometown. I knew a gentleman. He was a doctor. He told me his parents were professors during that time. His parents had to have a soldier with a gun stay in his house. I mean, Americans have no concept of things like that. I mean, imagine, you have a wife, you have children, and a man is living in your house with a gun. I mean, this is the type of situation that you lived under. This is the type of situation my friend lived under. How does that experience compare to what you are seeing right now in Canada as it escalates?
Well, more than that, as you can tell very quickly, I am a Polish immigrant. Not only I grew up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the Soviets, I grew up in Poland. I grew up in a city that had a concentration camp from the Nazi era. So my country, I mean, everywhere you looked, when I was growing up, there were bullet holes. I grew up in a city with a concentration camp. As kids, we were playing in bunkers of the SS. I mean, the history is left and right. And history of what? History of certain people that decided that they're going to be the today's pharaohs. And then the rest of the people will be just, well, they will own nothing and they will be eating crickets, riding a bicycle, and they will have nothing and they will be happy, just like we're seeing today. So nothing is new under the sun, the Bible says. What we have experienced during the Nazi era and before that, of course, Ottoman Empire, Genghis Khan, Roman Empire, Babylonians, Persians, Egyptians. I mean, nothing is new. You will always have a certain group of people that just want to wipe you out. And if you dare to disagree with them, well, then your family will be wiped out as well. And that's what the Nazis did. That's what the communists still do. I mean, it's not over. Tell that to the North Koreans or Chinese. We in 1980, when the Polish people took it to the streets, many were shot and tens of thousands were arrested. But finally, the Polish people said, enough, it's enough. I mean, we don't want to live like this. We don't want to live under the boots of anyone. And then finally, they came together. And that's the key. They united under the solidarity movement, solidarity with each other. Doctors in solidarity with the construction workers, nurses in solidarity with the police officers that just hated the regime, and they said, we will no longer work for you. And for that, solidarity movement was outlawed, and for that, people were arrested and many were murdered. My wife was distributing or smuggling, if you will, a solidarity pamphlet. If you were caught with just one solidarity pamphlet, there was 1 year of imprisonment. If you were listening to a European radio, so anything outside of the Soviet bloc, 5 years mandatory prison, of course, after you were beaten, tortured without mercy. So I grew up in an environment like that. I've seen corruption at the highest level. I've seen bribery left and right. That's how the whole system operates. You always had to carry something with you because the whole system was so corrupted to the core. Well, 1980, 81, 82 came. Solidarity was outlawed. 1 million people joined in 1980. When the government said this is illegal, 3 million people joined. And then they took it to the streets, and then the rest is history. The Iron Curtain was broken, the Berlin Wall collapsed, and Europe got its freedom. Poland in 1989 had its first democratic election after the invasion of the Nazis, and then later in 45 takeover of the Soviets. So I grew up in that, seeing this in front of my eyes. It's not that when I'm sharing my story, I'm telling you a nice Hollywood production. I'm telling you, I've seen this movie before. If you do not change the script, you're going to cry. This movie does not end well. It's a horror movie. It's not the
Pastor, let me ask you this, because I could hear the voices out there already. Okay, I could hear people out there already, what they're saying. How could you compare the Canadian government? And let's keep it with Canada and America, because they're both doing the same damn thing. Okay. In other words, you're talking about the protocols that were imposed during the pandemic. Okay. And you were railing against them. And I was like, well, how could you compare us to Soviets and Nazis? We're just trying to keep people safe and healthy. Well, that's a lot of crock of nonsense, Pastor. I'd like for you to tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I can very easily compare what was happening under the Nazism, fascism, and communism, socialism, because they started the same way. It was all about cleaning. It was all about purity. The Jewish people were called virus, unclean. They were looking for an enemy. Now, in the 21st century, they gave us an invisible enemy, but their famous statements were always the same. Give people the enemy and they will do whatever we tell them to do. So the concept, or the modus operandi, if you will, the blueprint, how to become a tyrant, is identical. The same things: overreach government, big bureaucracy, zero accountability, no checks and balances. Officers were not following the law of the land. Do you know that when those people, those wicked, evil Gestapo, as I call them, Gestapo in the German, it was a political police. When the political police here in Canada entered my church, they broke Criminal Code of Canada, section 176, 1, 2, and 3. They themselves should be charged, and there is a maximum 2 years of imprisonment for them for what they have done. They broke the law. Or simply what I did, I stood on the law. I stood on the law of God, of course, and I stood on the law of my country. The Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, international human rights, our domestic here, in the province of Alberta, human rights. The preamble to our Constitution, it says, whereas Canada acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. What we have seen in the past 3 years, God kicked out, because what God does, it brings accountability. It tells the villain that in the end of the day, you will be accountable for what you have been saying and for what you have been doing. They hate that. Every tyrant, every dictator hates accountability and checks and balances. That's why we call them tyrants. Also, the rule of law was kicked out. Those people were not following their own protocols to serve, to protect, and do no harm, as we see right now with doctors and nurses. This is tyranny. That's why I dare and I will be comparing what we have witnessed and still witnessing with the jobs and other things to Nazi Germany and to communism, Soviet Russia. Why? Because they are very similar and they are implementing very similar laws, or their laws were kicked out, lawlessness, let's put it this way, their own rules and regulations. Another thing is why I compare what we are observing right now. During the Soviets in Poland, 50,000 communists were ruling over 36 million Poles. 50,000 could break any law they wished, could do anything they wanted. They did not follow their own regulations and rules. They were listening to European radio. They were watching American movies. They were importing stuff that was illegal for the rest of us slaves. So they don't follow their own rules. And you saw that in your country, and I saw that in my country. The ministers that implemented mandates and regulations, they went partying, breaking their own rules. You couldn't see your brother for coffee. You couldn't see your grandma dying in a hospital, but you could throw a party if you were a politician. Officers of the law, so-called peace officers, when they show up, peace is gone. They were not following their own protocols. They were not following their own mandates. Hypocrisy, double standards, one law for me, one law for thee. That's why I call them the names that I'm calling them. I'm not just throwing names for the sake of, reaction. I'm calling them by their rightful titles. You act like a Gestapo, sir. You are Gestapo. You act like a KGB communist. Yeah, I'll call you KGB communist. You act like a psychopath. I'll call you psychopath, simply because I want you to understand that we see clearly what your intentions are, what you're doing. And people will come to me and say, well, I got a job too. I have children. I need my pension. I need my salary. I got a mortgage to pay, right? I need to feed my kids. Is that not what we heard during the Nuremberg trials? Well, I was just following orders. I was just doing what I was told, right? I mean, I'm sick and tired of those excuses. No. One day, for everything you have done, you will be accountable. And maybe not on this side of eternity. But I'm telling you, as a pastor, as a clergyman, one day you will stand before the judge that does not take any bribes. You will stand before the judge of judges, and you will be found guilty for what you have done to other human beings.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pastor, I mean, that's why we wanted to have you on the show, because you speak clearly, you speak boldly, and that's what's needed. That, quite frankly, that's what's needed now. If you're just joining us, you're with the front line with Joe and Joe. Pastor Artur Pawlowski up in Canada, Alberta, Canada. He's standing up and speaking out against tyranny that was being imposed on him and his church by the Trudeau regime. Joe Russello, where do you want to go?
Pastor Art, you've been arrested a number of times. I want to focus on the time you spent 51 days in jail. You gave a speech to the Canadian truckers. If you ask me, they're heroes. They were, driving across Alberta. Tell us about that situation. Tell us also about what the government did to them, because they definitely crossed the line on that one. That one blew me away. And I'll be honest with you, how they basically got involved with the banking. Talk about that. And to be honest with you, what shocks me is how didn't that open the eyes of the Canadian people? Because it should. Like, irregardless of your political identity, that was sheer power being put forth. And it should scare people, because you're next. Please tell us about that.
Well, I said that to the Canadian people for many years. I mean, I was arrested 16 times, over 100 court cases, and over 340 citations. So sometimes I spend more time in the court than in the church under this regime, the Castro regime behind the Iron Curtain, as I call it in China right now. So what happened was people's eyes were truly open. If you remember, we had over 1 million people joining the truck convoy. And of course, because I have become, as they called me, the Canada's pastor, the freedom pastor, I was asked to conduct a series of church services for the truckers. When you look at the solidarity movement, when you look at any peaceful non-compliance revolution, either in the United States of America, the civil rights movement, or during Mahatma Gandhi in India and South Africa, you see that it was done peacefully by religious people, really people that didn't want to turn to violence, people that were turning to faith and hope. So I was asked, we had 15 to 20,000 people on the streets of Calgary every single week, and it scared the government. I was asked by the truckers to conduct those church services and to feed them, and that's what I do. I feed thousands of people on the streets of Calgary every single month for 24 years. So I was asked if I can do a grill for the truckers or some kind of a food. So we did that. I did a service in the evening. I did another one in the morning. Off they went to Ottawa. It was absolutely beautiful. People were crying. People were hugging each other. It was amazing. I stayed behind because we had another movement going on in Milk River and in Coutts. That's the border between Montana and Alberta. So I was asked to become their pastor, to go over there and cheer people up as well. So I did. I took my son, my oldest son, Nathaniel. I took my worship leader. We had Lord's Supper in Milk River. There was a lots of people over there. And I'll tell you what I saw. I saw people of every background, every creed, if you will, every color, young, old, women, men, it didn't matter. They brought their cats and their dogs and their horses. I saw people hugging each other, crying with each other, praying with each other, loving each other, singing with each other. It was like the most beautiful family reunion I've ever seen on the soils of this land. And then I did another church service. I went through a barricade. Of course, they opened the barricade for me, and the RCMP is like your FBI. They videotaped me and they took pictures and they recognized me right away. And I asked if I can go to Coutts, to the border, to do another church service. They opened the barricade and they let me in. So I went over there. We did Lord's Supper. We were singing hymns. We did sing, national anthem. And then I gave a speech, 19 minutes speech. Here's what I said to Canadians. And here's what I say to you today, because I did not change. My God is not a schizophrenic God. He does not change his mind every 5 minutes because of the political pressure or because of mainstream propaganda media or money. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And here's what I said to Canadians. Listen, I'll paraphrase the 19-minute speech. I grew up in Poland. I saw solidarity movement. I saw the power when people united peacefully. This is a peaceful revolution. No guns, no swords. Stand up, roar like lions. Do not quit. Do not quit. Why? Do not quit for the sake of the children. Because what kind of a nation are we going to leave behind? Today, we are making this decision. Do not quit. Quit. Stand up. And that's what I said. And I repeated 3 times that this has to be done without violence. This is our Alamo. We have to be willing to die for what we believe in, but we don't want to kill. So anyway, no problems. People loved it. We had a supper after, and no problems. Our CMP was monitoring us, and so what? I have nothing to hide. It was a sermon. It was a speech. And I'm proud of it. I remember when I was in prison, the Crown prosecutor, that pathological liar, Stephen Johnston, here from Alberta, he was pressuring me to say I'm sorry, to plead guilty to a little charge so they can have their front story page. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, the one that became a symbol of freedom internationally, he pleads guilty. We told you he's a criminal. That's what they wanted. So they put me in solitary confinement. They stripped naked me. They put me in metal cages. They would drag me from my solitary confinement to another solitary cell on concrete, no water, no washroom. 45 days I spent like this. It was insanity at the highest level. I was arrested by a SWAT team, RCMP, detectives, Calgary police, uniformed Calgary police, undercover, special videographers from the RCMP. It was a gong show. I was interrogated for hours and thrown in prison. 45 days later, when I finally said to them repeatedly, I'm not pleading guilty. I have done nothing wrong and you can kill me. And they've tried. There's 5 different inmates that already testified that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me or at least to severely beat me up in prison. And I still said no. I was actually a hero in prison, if you will. Wherever I was showing up, the inmates were yelling, "Free Pastor Art, free Pastor Art. If anything happens to this man, watch your back." I mean, it was incredible. So the sheriffs, without telling my wife, my family, my lawyers, 3 weeks, they denied me access to my legal counselors. After 45 days, they came and they literally kidnapped me, shackled my feet, my hands, and they took me to a city hundreds of miles away from my lawyers and my family, and they placed me in MaxPod, which is for the most dangerous terrorists in the country. So I was there, freezing conditions, minus 25. It was horror movie. I was only let 30 minutes out. So I called my wife and I said, tell my lawyers, I don't think I'm coming out. I think they're going to murder me here. I'm freezing. I asked for a blanket. They laughed at me. They said, at least I have fresh air. I think their intention is to murder me here. So do something or you will never see me again. So anyway, next day, the judge heard what was going on and that scared them. So they moved me from a MaxPod to, you would not believe it, to a psych ward without the knowledge of doctors, without any evaluation of AHS, which is Alberta Health Services. Illegal. Everything they have done to me, illegal from the beginning to the end. So I spent there a week, and then eventually a judge ordered them to release me, and I am on house arrest from that day. So almost a year I am on house arrest for my crime. I have been accused of causing Canadian economy over $400 million worth of damages, like a terrorist, for my speech, for my sermon in Coutts. Also, I am the first and the only Canadian ever to be charged with this terrorism charge, with this interfering with the crucial infrastructure under the Defense Act. So when you're blowing pipes or bridges, you would be charged with something like this. And also a breach of probation. So I'm facing 10 and a half years of imprisonment, and we had the trial already. During the trial last week, the Crown prosecutor not only accused me of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damages for what I said, but he also compared me to Rwanda genocide. He says that what I did, I was inciting people like a person that incites murder. He compared solidarity movement because during my sermon, I had a hoodie with a solidarity write-up on it. And he says somehow solidarity movement, which we know historically, of course, and I saw it with my own eyes, was a peaceful movement. He says that was inciting violence. You know that this Crown did not call even one witness. His entire case is based on 19 minutes sermon, and he went word by word. I am the first, probably, and the only clergyman in the history of this country that his sermon was word by word scrutinized by the tyrannical government. He said that my sermon alone is a criminal offense and I should go to prison for that. If I lose, and I don't think that Canadians realize how big is this case, because if they realize how dangerous is this case, there would be tens of thousands of people around the Premier's office or house, tens of thousands, because if I lose, Canada will cease to have freedom of expression and freedom of religion. If I go down, every politician that disagrees with the ruling party is liable. Every clergyman is liable for whatever you say. Every media personality, every comedian, every person that dares privately, because this was a private settings that I said those words. It was recorded. Privately or publicly is liable to be charged with terrorism. That's how dangerous this country has become. I mean, if you would tell me when I emigrated here to my beloved Canada in 1995 that I'm going to be fighting for the for my life and the life of my children, and excuse me, for what? Just because I gave a sermon, I would never ever believe you. I would just not believe you. So how this started? This started with indoctrination and a slow implementation of little laws here and there. It's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Pastor Art Pawlowski is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. This is I'm almost speechless And I'm a loudmouth Italian guy from New Jersey. Like I'm at a loss for words because everything you just described, Pastor. If I didn't know you lived in Canada, I would have said you did live. I would have thought they brought back the Soviet Union, or you maybe took a trip to Cuba or North Korea or something like. And the point is this: you have the World Economic Forum, okay, just dying to concoct ways to undermine freedom of speech, whether it's here, whether it's in Canada. They come up with all sorts of legal constructs to try to say, well, of course we believe in freedom of speech, except if it's speech that they don't like. Okay, what do you see? Because in the next segment, we're going to have on Mike McDonald from the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights. Okay, and we're going to talk about the spike in anti-Christian. Or basically anti-Christian sentiment, both here and in the UK and Europe and everything else. Freedom of speech is not something that we could take for granted anymore. And the WEF, the radicals in the United States, you're discussing the Trudeau regime and what they did to you for giving a speech. They're going to concoct any way possible to say that what you did, okay, endangered people's lives. Therefore, you don't have the right to freedom of speech. We have a few minutes left with you, Pastor. Talk about that, please.
Well, first of all, you have to understand that every tyrant is afraid of a clergyman or people of faith generally. Why? Because those are two competing spirits. We are saying that there is a higher law, so therefore there is accountability. There should be checks and balances. The tyrants say, no, we are gods. We are the pharaohs. We can do whatever we want. That's why there is such a crackdown on people of faith. That's why you have to understand this is nothing new. Around the world, from the beginning to the end, the tyrants, the wannabe pharaohs, hate any man of faith because it's dangerous to them, because it reminds them and people around that there is a higher power, there is a living God, and there is a bigger law. You have to also remember that the first right that always goes down every single time historically. I teach history. So I'm telling you, every time the freedom of religion goes, all of your other rights follow. That's how it starts. Freedom of religion is your Alamo that everyone should be willing to die on. I'll tell you why. Even if you're atheist, if my rights to express my freedom, my faith go, they will go after your rights, even if you're atheist, even if you don't believe in anything, even if you believe in Martians, like they're trying to, put that garbage on the rest of us right now. If my rights go, be sure of it. That's history. That's not Pastor Artur Pawlowski preaching. That's history. Your rights will go as well. That's why I have always been saying to Canadians and Americans as well, rise up, stand up with me, because if I go down, you're next. So you got to make sure that I am still in a game, in a ring, if you will, fighting, because I am the buffer between them and you. So support me. Like my brother David always says, you supply the bullets, we keep shooting. Of course, I'm talking about words and videos and sermons and food. We're not talking about any sorts of violence. But the analogy stands. You supply us with the means, the bullets, if you will, we keep shooting. We will keep fighting the oppressors for your sake and the sake of your children. Again, if we go down, your children are next. And that's history.
That's right, Pastor. That's right. I'm going to hand it over to Joe. We only, unfortunately, Pastor, we're going to move to the next segment and talk to Mike McDonald along similar lines, talk about freedom of speech and free expression of our religion. Number one, where can our audience members know more about what you have going on, social media and the whole nine yards? If you let us know that.
www.streetchurch.ca. Street like a road, streetchurch.ca. And that's our website. And of course, I got other social networks like Facebook, Artur Pawlowski, or Artur Pawlowski TV, YouTube, and other ways that you can watch what I say. You can see the arrest. You can see the whole history of what I have been talking about. Also, you can hear my speech in Quds, for which I am facing 10.5 years of imprisonment.
Well, Pastor, I will tell you this, and then we're going to hand it over to Joe. We got about 3 minutes left, but Joe and I say on the show all the time, the greatest counter-revolutionary act you could commit right now is to open your mouth. Open your mouth and speak the truth. That is, our mouth is our gun. Our words are our bullets. But we're dropping truth bombs. That's what we're doing. Joe, we have about 3 minutes, and then we have to bring on Mike.
Pastor Art, I'll tell you what, God always rises someone up, and you are that guy. He prepared you in Poland for this moment. There is no question in my mind, and there is also no question in my mind that you will be provided for. You will be taken care of. No doubt. No doubt. Whenever you stick your neck out on the line for Jesus Christ, he always comes through. Where there is Christ, there is hope. Do you think, or let me say this, do you know that the Canadian people will turn around and look to the light of Christ? Do you think that will happen? Or better question, when will that happen?
Well, every time, historically speaking, when people have less, then their eyes and their ears are open more. So Canadians, over 50% of Canadians are struggling right now to pay their bills. I mean, it's a disaster at every corner. People are going to start losing their homes. So I hope that they will rise up, join us. I have become a leader of the Independence Party of Alberta. I'm running in this upcoming election in May. Albertans will have a choice this time around, and I hope they're going to choose someone that not only is a fighter, but is also a winner. And I have no intention of quitting. You see, lions do not bow before the hyenas. We eat them for breakfast.
I love it.
I love it.
All right. Pastor Art Pawlowski, thank you so much for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. You're better. We want to have you back in the future. Keep us posted, everything else. And of course, Pastor, we're going to be praying for you. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, Joe, we're gonna keep it moving because everything he's talking about is shocking. You would think that we're all told that in the West we don't do such things, okay? And yet here he's getting dragged from prison to prison, okay, in Canada of all places. And why? Because he opened his mouth. He gave a sermon, okay? He gave a speech, and basically the powers that be don't like it. Well, guess what? Freedom of speech and free expression of religion is under assault everywhere in the world. And nobody knows that better than the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights. Okay. And we have on Mike McDonald's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. And we're going to be discussing just that, because there was 2 great articles recently in the Catholic League having to do with just that. The West's war on Catholicism and anti-Christianity in general. And I think we might be having just a little bit of a connection problem, getting Mike on. But we're gonna do our best to get him on here. But we'll start the conversation, and as soon as we're able to, here he is. Mike's on right now. We got him. Mike McDonald, how you doing, brother?
Good. How you guys doing tonight?
All right, hanging in. So, yeah, I'm sure you were listening to part of the last segment with Pastor Pawlowski. 2 articles recently that were published by the Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights. One of them is War on Religion, spiking in the U.S. and the U.K., and the other one was the Western world is at war with Catholics. I'm going to skip the bio just to say Mike McDonald has been the communications director of the Catholic League since 2020. So, Mike, thanks for coming on the show. Joe Russello, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Mike, I'll be honest. I mean, we follow this. I know you and Bill at the Catholic League are following it very closely with regard to basically the war that's taking place on religion across the Western world. How has the radical LGBT agenda played into this spike, this war? Because clearly they are at war with people of faith.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you got there, Joe. Because I remember the last. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
Okay.
I remember the last time I was on here with you, we were talking about the election and how the Democrats have really bought into the transgender movement and the abortion movement. That seemed to really be their last push. And to a broader point, I do think the whole LGBT alphabet people play into that equation in a certain degree. It is a war on truth. It's a war on family. They are completely trying to redefine how we understand civil society by attacking the nuclear family, by attacking the father, the mother in the home, raising children, by promoting this whole agenda. And beyond just the promoting of it, that this is also a societal good, there is the dangerous fact that you have to affirm it every second. You as an individual can have no other opinions but to affirm that. And in the process of affirming it, that we're all essentially held by the woke, politically correct police here to give up our own beliefs in order to contort to the dominant cultural norms. And that is a dangerous precedent. And to be picking out one segment of the population, forcing everyone to affirm them to whether they agree with it or not, is dangerous. But I also would say, to broaden it, additionally, you see this also with the abortion issue as well, that we go around lying and saying that abortions are safe and they're rare, and that when in reality that is also the destruction of a human life. And to the point that you guys brought up just with the good pastor there, thoughts and prayers go out to him. He's fighting the good fight. But it is truth, right? We're dropping the truth bombs, and they are at war with truth. They want to completely redefine how we understand ourselves and our place in society. And to do that, they need to cut us away from our families, and they need to cut us away from God.
Mike McDonald, let me ask you a question. If you're just joining us, Mike McDonald from the Catholic League. I've always said, the way I see it is somewhere in the back rooms of some Ivy League law department is where these radical professors get together with radical students to try to concoct ways, and I'm being serious, they try to concoct ways to overcome a major stumbling block for them, which is the Bill of Rights, okay? And I want your comments on this. My thought is that it started with political correctness, which is just basically the newest iteration of political correctness is hate speech or anti-hate speech. Tell our audience how we need to be on guard against this whole legal and political concept that they're ramming down our throats called hate speech. Because hate speech is just the tool that they're going to use to take away your First Amendment rights, not only to free speech, but also to freedom of association, also freedom of religion, also freedom of the press. Yeah. Talk about that, Mike, or even if you think I'm wrong about that.
No. I agree with what you're saying. It is a sort of slippery slope, right? In the 90s, everyone had to be PC, politically correct, and it slowly escalated over time. We have been on a slippery slope, and I do think you're right. It is these academics, these elites in the Ivies, but also on Wall Street in the government, that have over time been chipping away at our freedoms of speech, particularly because you had to be politically correct. Then we got into the hate speech. There's the whole, like, Donald Trump, whenever he spoke, he was just spreading misinformation. That seems to be the new one now, is you're spreading misinformation, you're spreading propaganda. I mean, at the Catholic League, we have a weekly YouTube video that we put up, and just mentioning the word abortion, not even going into any details on abortions, because we mostly just talk about the legality, election results, things like that. YouTube automatically slaps a misinformation tag on it, just for bringing up the subject. So I think we've gone from politically correct to hate speech to misinformation. Now, anything that is not in keeping with the democratic, woke, liberal, left, communist norms is misinformation, and they shut it down like that. And yeah, I do think that's absolutely, and right, we're not just talking hypotheticals at this point. We are in a real world. Scenarios like this, particularly on people of faith, this keeps coming up. Was it back in January? There was the hockey player for the Flyers, Pravov. He got essentially mauled in particularly the Canadian press. They went after him ruthlessly because he refused to wear a Pride jersey. On Pride Night in January, I don't understand that still. They get more and more days each month, but that's a story for a different day. There were a group of high school students at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., wearing beanies that, again, they could all identify themselves. They were there for the March for Life, so they all had matching beanies on, so you could see who was in the group. They were thrown out because the museum staff didn't like that they were wearing a pro-life message on their hats. A year before, it was last April, I think it was, in Michigan, there was a high school student who's sending text messages back and forth between friends, was suspended for 3 days because he stated it was his understanding of his faith in Jesus Christ that there were only two sexes. There are no genders, there's just two sexes. and they showed him the door for 3 days for that. And that's happening here in this country. The land of the free doesn't seem to be all that free anymore.
No, it doesn't. Joe Russello.
Just talking to Pastor Art, and you're mentioning these cases, and I think sometimes people, they just compartmentalize, Mike. They don't think it can happen here, but it can.
Yeah.
I mean, a friend of mine, Maurice Fitzpatrick, wrote a book about what happened in Northern Ireland. Catholics couldn't get work. They couldn't get work. You were basically relegated to a ghetto. This could happen. I mean, and just like Pastor Art said, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's one law, one law, one law. They keep pushing it. And I'll be honest with you, I actually think, we haven't been like thrown in jail. We haven't like been financially deeply burdened, but that is very real, and that could easily occur. It could easily occur. And to be truthful with you, it's amazing that this is going on. Talk about what happened with the FBI recently, because basically they're investigating traditional / Orthodox Catholics. Basically, I mean, I don't even know the angle on this. How you could possibly say that they're terrorists? Talk about that, Mike, because that's very real, and the mainstream media doesn't cover it. You guys,
no, not at all. The mainstream media doesn't want to touch this, and it is very real. And to your point, it doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface when you just read through it. But behind the scenes, it makes a little bit more sense. So, was it last week? It came out. Kyle Seraphin, sure your viewers have seen him on. Dan Bongino has him on a lot. He got a leak from a guy inside the FBI that the Richmond field office put out a memo stating that they were convinced that radical traditional Catholics, RTCs as they call them, are the greatest fomenters of anti-Semitism, white supremacy in the country right now. They are just pure evil, and they need to be monitored. Now, the document doesn't go to much length. So it does say, well, there's a difference between traditional Catholics who like the Latin Mass and the radical traditional Catholics who also like the Latin Mass, and they're just bad. That was essentially the whole argument. It's all sourced based off of a couple of radical left-wing rags. They got something from American Magazine, and I think it was Slate Magazine. But the bulk of the research came from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has been completely discredited as a phony organization designed as a tool to attack people that hold traditional values that the woke do not agree with. That is essentially all this organization has become. They list Alliance Defending Freedom, the Family Research Council, two great organizations that the Catholic League has partnered with. They're listed as hate groups, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, maybe some of these Catholic groups that they do point out have some hot takes, but it's just that they have some hot takes. I don't necessarily agree with them. I'm sure there are some people that do agree with them. Some people don't agree with them. But again, at the end of the day, all they are expressing is their God-given right to free speech and their God-given right to freedom of religion, which the FBI is now targeting, which they're not supposed to do. And the dangerous thing is, like, I know there are some people in the media, well, the FBI has kind of walked that back a little bit. Well, they are kind of a little crazy. That doesn't matter at the end of the day, whether you're crazy, whether you're insane. I mean, listen, we are willing to promote the craziness that a man can become a woman and vice versa. So if that is allowed to be in the mainstream, then anything should be allowed to go these days.
Mike McDonald joining us here at the front line with Joe. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. The dangerous thing is
they'll come back in.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries. No worries.
The dangerous thing is that what's ultimately going to happen is, and this is where we get into behind the scenes, they're going to use this as a tool to go after people of any faith. They're going to start with the Catholics, with the radical traditional Catholics, and then make that broader, probably include, Latin Mass Catholics, and then just include anyone that doesn't want to wear a Pride Night jersey or, goes to any semblance of worship over the weekend. Those people will become the enemies, and they are going to hunt them down, and they are getting everything in place to do it.
Mike McDonald, let me ask you a question. I know from my, I've been viewing the Catholic League for years now. Okay. Bill Donahue has been very effective. Okay. Doesn't win every time, but at least he raises, he kicks up some dust. All right. He gets their CEOs on the email list. Okay, have them get emails, 500,000, 600,000 emails in their inbox to say, "Hey, man, what the hell are you doing?" Okay, what is our problem? Because at the end of the day, we do still have a constitution. We're not done yet. We have money in our pockets that we go out and earn. We're not very good stewards of it because we give money to all these woke corporations. We don't boycott them. Bill has shown us that if you put enough pressure, they'll back down. We just saw that in Florida. And Joe and I are not the biggest fans of Ron DeSantis. We'll vote for him when push comes to shove, but we're not the biggest fans, okay? But the point is, he did stand up to Disney. He showed if you stand up to them, they'll back down. What's our problem, Mike? They should not be winning this culture war the way they are, but yet they are. What's going on in your estimation?
I think there's a couple of things going on here. Number one, lack of backbone. That seems to be a just deadly disease that's going around, particularly in traditional conservative circles. That when push comes to shove, people don't want to fight. They just, it magically goes away. You know, they'll talk a good game, but when it comes time to fight, suddenly everyone just becomes astronomers and they start looking up, and no one actually wants to be the guy to get in there. And great credit to Bill Dunn. He will lead the charge every single time. And, you know, we win some, we lose some. It doesn't matter. You have to fight. You have to show up on the day, be ready to drop the gloves. And so we're always willing and ready to do that at the Catholic League. I think that can't be said for a lot of other groups. Too many of these groups are, you know, working from home, working in their pajamas. They're not actually in the thick of the fight, and they don't necessarily want to be in the thick of the fight. Because to another point, I think particularly on our side, there are a lot of people that want to be accepted as being a nice guy, that we hold a lot of positions that are contrary to the mainstream view of things these days. And we're more worried about being accepted in the country club, being invited to the posh parties, to be included in the Tony circles, that is more what some people on our side, I think, lose sight of. That, you know, steal a line from the communists, you know, we're trying to make an omelet here. Sometimes you got to break a few eggs. We don't want to break the eggs because we want to be accepted at the end of the day. I think that's a normal, natural inclination, is to want to be accepted, but you have to have some principles, because if you're just going to sell out on your principles, then what good are you? So I think it is that lack of backbone, the lack of acceptance, and I think to a certain extent also some people on our side got a little complacent. Everything's going to be okay. We keep winning in the Congress, you know, and some of these other in some of these other Anglosphere countries, like, oh, we're able to form governments from time to time, so it's fine. We can just do a rearguard action. We can slow up the left, and we'll eventually win at the end of the day. Just, you know, now's not the right time to fight. And I think we just got a little too complacent, because, yeah, abortion and transgenderism are huge issues. But I think because they've seen such a lack of coordinated effort on the side of the traditional conservative values, that we are now in this point where they're actively, openly saying, yeah, we're going to start targeting the Latin mass Catholics. Yeah, you know what? These high school students wearing their pro-life hats, throw them out. There's not going to be any consequences. You think there's, you know, only two sexes? Yeah, you're going to jail. That just happened in Canada. A high school student, Catholic high school student, was thrown in jail for stating that by going against the school's bathroom policy. And shamefully, the Catholic school principal sided with the government and said he's not allowed back in school. You know, makes you wonder what's going on. You know, Canada, hopefully you guys can turn it around. Or is, what are we calling now? Canada, as Gene Kim.
Yeah, it's I think it's a hybrid, sadly, of Canadian and China. But sadly,
Yeah,
we're following we're following suit. It scares me, Mike. I'll be truthful with you. I mean, the thing that frustrates me. I mean, you could see it in the establishment. They're insulated. They have money. They've gone along. They've drank the Kool-Aid. The thing that frustrates me, it's the middle class. It's the middle class Democrat that basically their grandfather was a Democrat. They grew up in that type of household. I don't know how their eyes aren't open to this. I just can't understand it. That to me is the frustrating part, because they're going to get flushed down the toilet too. And they are. They are. Financially speaking, eggs are $20 for 60 eggs. My wife
Yeah.
just paid. I mean, you're paying out the nose. These people don't support you. Talk about that, particularly the Catholic that grew up. We have to break those identities and those tribes and see. And frankly, Mike, that's my frustration. I don't understand it because, like I said, you're getting flushed down the toilet too.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I do think there is definitely a bit of a cultural mentality. In a lot of ways, I think the Republican Party in this country, particularly, before I went to the Catholic League, I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked in the Trump administration. The establishment of the Republican Party never wanted to fight on these issues at all. Didn't really even care. And I'm not even talking about, the pro-life issues, the culture war issues. They didn't really care about, there's the great scene in the 92 election that H.W. Bush doesn't understand how his scan works at the grocery store when they're scanning his milk. Like, that is more typical in my experience of the Republican establishment in Washington in particular, that at the end of the day, we don't care. We do want to go to the country club, like that. The country club Republicans, that's a real thing. They never cared about the border. They don't care about living wages. They don't care about, these bread and butter economic issues. As long as, the fat cats are able to party, they're good. As long as business is making money, that's all they care about. The, rising tide raises all boats. They'll give you some lines like that. And so it is kind of hard for me to sit and say, oh, you old school blue collar working class hero Democrats. You do have some good points. The Republican Party doesn't care enough about you. And it was nice for that brief shining moment where we did have Trump in there, where you could actually say people did care about the blue collar issues, that did care about the working man. And I think as a movement in general, because I think by and large, most of the people in the Republican Party are hopeless cases. But I do think that a lot of these blue collar working class Democrats just don't have another place to go. So they're willing to keep pulling the lever for the Dems and just saying, well, what are we going to do? And I do think as conservatives, as people of faith, we do need to especially reach into some of the older school Catholic social teaching. They're talking about, dignity for the worker. Pope Leo X, his whole position on, I can't say it in Latin, it's been a long day, but on his address on modernity was the whole point is that we want small private ownership, that your household should be able to, have a farm, have its own little cottage industry, and you should be able to make a decent living in this economy and be able to trade with other people in society and get everything you want. I think as a conservative movement, as people of faith with traditional values, we need to get back to some of those more blue collar issues and really start reaching out to these people, these old school blue collar Democrats, because you're right, they don't have a home right now. They are shooting themselves in the foot continuously, and we need to reach out to them because they are.
I agree with you, Mike.
Come over.
100%.
Hands down. If the Republicans don't look, and we said this before, Joe and I both voted for Trump twice. Okay, why? Because he's a saint? No, because we agreed with his stand with judges. We knew the kind of judges we would get, and yes, he didn't just pay lip service to being pro-worker. He actually did something about it. And yet, like Joe says, you get a lot of. We grew up with them, Mike. We all know the type. My old man was one of them. My father never voted Democrat. My father was a Teamster. He told me, he said, I gotta listen to all these guys I work with. They're all talking this, that, and the other thing. In the meantime, they're voting for these idiots because they feel like it's in their interest or there's some sort of identity there. They feel like they're betraying them. Whatever it is, we have to break that. We have to break that because these guys, the Democrat Party is not a political party anymore. They're an insane asylum.
Yes,
they're insane. Mike McDonald, we got to let you go, but we thank you. Real quick, tell our audience all about Catholic League, where they can follow you, all that fun stuff.
And where they can support you.
Yeah, definitely do check us out on CatholicLeague.org. you can find all of our social media stuff right there on the website. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble. You can find our videos there. And while you're there, check out, you'll see right on the homepage of our website, Walt's Disenchanted Kingdom. I actually have my copy of the DVD right here. You can buy this on the Catholic League's website, or you can watch it for free right there on the website. We got a player up. It's about how Disney's gone terribly woke. Do check us out, catholicleague.org. We've got everything there for you, so check it out.
Mike McDonald, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you, brother. We are so happy that we are brothers with you and that we're fighting this fight and we're doing the best we can. So we'll talk to you soon. God bless you, brother.
Yeah, definitely. God bless you guys. Keep up the good fight.
Thanks,
Peace.
Michael. See, that's what you need, Joe Russello. That's what you need. You need a Bill Donahue, a Mike McDonald. You have an organization. Here's the bottom line, Joe. They don't take crap. They see something wrong, particularly when it comes to, let's say, assaulting their religious and civil liberties. And let me tell you something. Bill Donahue, he'll go to bat for Jews. He'll go to bat for Protestants. If you're attacking people based on their religion, he's going to go to bat for you. The Catholic League extends that hand to people to try to point out what's going on out there. I think it's just incredibly valuable, the work that they do.
Oh, I agree. To be honest with you, and to Mike's point, they got guts. They simply do. And more people need to have guts because ultimately, like what Pastor Art said, ultimately, it's about your kids. You're going to leave this earth and you're going to leave it to someone, and it's your kids. And you know something? Power is not given away, it's taken, and it's been taken from us. They used the emergency of the pandemic, and the executive branch of our country has exerted power over the people. Listen, it's as clear as day. They have done it. And frankly, we have to take it back. We have to take it back. And that begins with opening your mouth. That begins with taking a risk. That begins with sacrifice. That's at the grassroots level. If you're not willing to do that, you're sure as heck not willing to do what Pastor Art did and go to jail.
Right.
I mean, these are basic things that each and every person can do, and they don't. And it boggles my mind. People compartmentalize their lives. They actually think that somehow they're not going to be affected. You are already affected. You are already affected, economically speaking, irregardless of your religious beliefs, if you have them or you don't. Look at what has happened.
Right.
Joe, it's insane.
Right.
Like Pastor Art said, in 1995, you would have never thought in a million years that this could happen to this country, where they would prevent you from speaking.
Right.
They will prevent you from speaking. They say it openly. We're going to basically, like, they determine what's the truth. Misinformation. Who are you to say
Right.
that?
Who are you? Who are you? And that's why I brought up about free speech and hate speech. These are the things we have to be on guard for. We cannot just let this go. And I don't understand people. How are the parents at that Catholic school where the president, the headmaster of the school took the side of the wokesters, okay, against one of his own students? How come there's not 100 fathers there in the headmaster's office the next morning to say to him right to his face, "Are you smoking crack? Are you doing drugs?" Because this is a Catholic school. I send my kid here because I want him to be formed in the Catholic faith. And you're going to take the side of these woke idiots? Are you kidding me? Fathers don't even do that, Joe. They don't even do that. Joe, I got to give you the last word. We have 30 seconds.
Joe, we're asleep at the wheel. We are asleep at the wheel. I mean, you see it in Canada, you see it at the US, and it's happening right before our eyes. It's a little bit more advanced in Canada. I think Trudeau is a little bit more radical. But I'll tell you what, if Gavin Newsom gets the chair, and I got news for you, that's who they're pushing for, people.
Yep.
I am going to tell you right now, it's on. It's on in this country. The machine is backing Gavin Newsom, by the way.
Right.
This is no longer a country of the people. I'm telling you that right now, and that should scare you.
Yep. We got to leave it there, Joe Russello. Thank you. A great conversation with both the pastor and Mike McDonald. Please, wherever you see us on social media, The Front Line with Joe and Joe on YouTube and at with Joe and Joe on Twitter. Really help us out in both areas if you can. And wherever you see us, hit a like, hit a subscribe, hit a share these videos. That really helps us out a lot. We really appreciate it. We don't ask you for any money here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We just ask you to help us with the algorithms to get our message out there. So we want to thank you all. This was a fantastic hour that we spent with you here tonight. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.